right? The Germans hated everyone, and the feeling was quite often mutual, right? I mean, the history of Europe was sort of the history of killing one another and looking for the witch, alternately. That was the other thing we did a lot. We didn't consider ourselves one big happy family. But all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1700s, there becomes a need for this thing called the white race. Well, what changed, right? What changed was rich folks looked around, started counting, and realized they were heavily outnumbered. When you take African enslaved folks, European indentured servants, just one level above enslavement, when you look at other peasants in the European group who maybe weren't indentured, you put them together, they outnumber the elite, right? You had a handful of folks that owned all the stuff, and everybody else working for them. See, some things really don't change. 400 years on, we're back to that, right? And so they looked around and realized they had to figure out a way to get some of those poor Europeans on their team. They create the notion of whiteness, the white race, give out little perks here and there. You can enter into contracts, testify in court. You can vote, at least if you're male. We're going to put you on the slave patrol to keep those people in line, right? It's not real power. You know, you're on the slave patrol. You don't own the land, right? You know, and this is important in an era of police misconduct in our country to understand. This is the bright line of the first iteration of law enforcement was slave patrol, right? And black and brown folks know that. See, knowing your history is really important because I gather that a lot of white Americans don't know that history that stretches from slave patrols to the present. And if you don't understand that, and you don't understand the way in which black life has been discounted so regularly, then a phrase like, let alone a movement like Black Lives Matter won't make sense to you, right? And then you'll say things like, well, but what about my life? But all lives matter, don't I? But what about me? I know all lives matter, precious. I know. I got 2 white children. I know. You don't have to tell me that their lives matter. The problem is every police officer in America knows already. And every teacher in America knows, and every employer knows, and every bank loan officer knows that their lives matter and that their credit record probably won't. See, that's the difference. Right? But if you don't know the history, including the slave patrol history all the way up to the present, lots of misconduct in the Los Angeles area. If you don't know enough about it, just watch, I think it was episode 2 of the 5-part OJ documentary on ESPN. You'll know all you need to know about the history of the LAPD. And it'll put everything in perspective for you if you didn't already know. Right? Now, you could have just asked some black folks and they would have told you. Could have just asked some Latinx folks and they would have told you. But a lot of times we just don't know this stuff because we haven't been taught. Not your fault. Right? I wasn't taught it. I took AP history. That's the history for smart people. And they still didn't teach me about that. So you can't know what you weren't taught. You can't teach what you don't know. So anyway, the divide and conquer starts in the 1700s. And all of a sudden, the cross-racial rebellions that had begun to foment, begin not to foment, begin to diminish, and whiteness becomes stronger. The Civil War era is the same thing. You got rich white folks telling poor white folks that they got to go out and fight because the rich don't fight. The rich aren't going to fight to keep their own property interest in other human beings. They're going to get poor people to do that. Rich people, if y'all aren't clear on this, don't fight wars. They get poor people to do the dirty work for them. They get doctors to write notes saying they have heel spurs and can't go to Vietnam. That's what rich people do. And if y'all don't know who I'm talking about, you can just Google that. That's what the internet is for, y'all.